Hi everybody, Tracy Brown here. Essentially, today's video is going to be a part 2 of a previous video I did around saying no to the negative food talk. And so I'm actually going to look at the exact title of that for us as I'm talking. So yeah, say who says to the diet talk. So I want to say a part 2 of this video is going to be what do we do about the diet talk exactly? And so that in my last video, we talked a lot about, saying no to it and in all different kinds of ways. So hopefully you check that out. I had a great question, which today's video is about answering a question. And so a viewer asked, so rather than ignore the negative voice, and this person is always talking when they're eating or thinking about food, this person asked, is it best to challenge it or ignore it and let it go like mindfulness? The answer is both. It depends on the situation. Sometimes there's so much power, especially for us very sensitive and kind of self-blaming types, to say, like, I shouldn't have done that. What's wrong with you? The inner critic is so loud. And sometimes the best thing for us to do is just say, no, thank you. I'm not listening to that right now. I've got better things to do. I've got a meal to eat. I've got things to do. I've got homework to do or somebody to meet. And I really want to enjoy this meal, so I'm not listening to you, and thank you very much. And sometimes, and I do this practice with people on a weekly basis, is to, when somebody says, I shouldn't eat that hamburger, and this is the dialogue, and I'll ask, well, how come? Who says? And they'll hear a diet talk voice saying, well, you can't really eat that because it's like too much fat, and fat makes you fat, right? And so I will say, well, actually, who says? And then what we have to do is do a little series of breaking down, like, well, how much fat is too much, and how would you know? And a lot of people don't have the answer to that because there really isn't an answer to it. When you're listening to your body will tell you when there is enough of any one thing, like we talked about in the last video. But to help you a little bit more cognitively, what I would say is think about, there's all these associations for different kinds of food. So like the American Heart Association, says that 30% of our intake can be in fat. And when we really start to break it down, it's, a hamburger eaten in a day with a big mix of other kinds of foods is unlikely to get you above that if you're really paying attention to your body. Now, even if you're above that, again, it doesn't have to be a big deal, because if we look at the big picture of your eating over the course of days and weeks and even months, things can even out again if you're listening. And so that's a little cognitive information for you to be able to say, wait a minute, like, it's the big picture here. It's not one meal that's a problem. And that's one way we can talk back to it if ignoring it's not working, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and there's just too much guilt. And so when people hear me say, oh, so I guess like fat in the big picture, like a meal is not a big deal, and I would say, of course not. So what's really going on that's too much? Because it's not the fat. And they'll just say, well, it's a higher calorie food, and I'm afraid if I eat it, I'll gain weight. And that's really the issue. It's not really about health. It's not even about the hamburger. It's about, oh my gosh, if I fully feed myself what I want, maybe I won't stop, or maybe I'll gain weight and then people will judge me and won't love me and I'll be alone. It kind of goes kind of deep pretty fast. And it's recognizing, like, oh my gosh, of course. It would feel then scary to eat a hamburger if you were feeling that way. And so we have to back that up to the idea of, there's so much to unpack there, honestly. There's issues of fearful of, living in a culture that has so much fat prejudice. And whether you're listening to this and you're thin somewhere in the middle or you're fatter, we all have different experiences with that kind of stuff. So if you're listening to this and you're in a thinner body, recognize that as painful as the body shaming and the worry about being in a larger size is, we don't exactly experience that if you don't have a bigger body. And so just being sensitive to that is really important. But I do know that your feelings and the shame about, worry about your body is still real and painful. But recognize that when we are fearing being fat, it's a whole lot different than actually being fat. Okay? So